Welcome back, or welcome to the Rebel Tech Podcast. I'm your host, David Dunmoyer, here to discuss, as always, all things emerging technologies and the promises and perils therein. We have a fun episode today, not just because of the discussion, the policy area, but looking to my left, as he's now on the camera, you'll recognize the former co-host, Zach Whiting, is back in the Rebel Tech, although this time I get to ask you the questions, yes. And I intentionally omitted all the hard questions I'm going to ask you as part of your hazing to being a guest on the show, but I'm happy to have friend and colleague Zach Whiting, who is now the manager of public policy at Riot Platforms, on the Rebel Tech Podcast, along with a friend and second-time attendee of this podcast, almost a year ago to the date, Brian Morgenstern, who is the senior vice president of public policy at Riot Platforms. So first, gentlemen, thank you for coming back to the show, and great to see you both.
Thanks for having us. This is going to be fun.
Glad to be back.
Yeah. Zach was like, should I join this? Should I do it? I was like, dude, it was your show.
That's right. Yeah, I know.
Yes, you should do it.
The people are still wondering what happened. So let's start with that, I guess. Let's start, because I think last we talked, Riot was almost specifically focused on the blockchain realm. So let's start with, what is Riot Platforms? Brian, take it where you want. And Zach, what is your role in that company, just to kind of set the playing field here?
Yeah. So the Bitcoin mining space is robust in Texas, of course, and we've been here for years and have invested billions of dollars and have hundreds of employees in Texas. And we've been mining Bitcoin, and we still have 2 large sites where we're doing that. But in today's market, AI, HPC data centers are what's really needed in this kind of space race for AI dominance in the world. Bitcoin's still very important, and it's a part of the story. But what we're seeing now is pretty much all the companies in our space are shifting or pivoting some or part of their operations and their knowledge, their know-how, their abilities to developing these sorts of data centers. And the connectivity is with the power, because we all have tremendous amounts of energy that is operational, it's approved, and that's one of Riot's strengths. And so we've got a lot of the ingredients, and we're one of the more adaptable businesses to switch from one to the other, or to have a mix of the two. And so that's in an era where there is now far more demand than supply for the resources needed. It's a natural evolution to turn to Bitcoin miners and incorporate them into that growth story for the U.S. And it's really where you're seeing pretty much all the incremental GDP growth in the United States is in these types of investments and deals. So it's exciting to be a part of. We're drinking from fire hoses, whatever, pick your cliche, but we're running fast and developing fast, and it's a really exciting time to be involved.
Yeah, and what a testament to, just thinking back, the conversation we had a year ago. Zach, you're with me on this side of the table. We had Lee Bratcher as well with the Texas Blockchain Council. And us think tank nerds were talking about the ideation or potential of utilizing the assets within the crypto space to provide energy and to use that to be a net contributor to the grid. And here we have entrepreneurs that are doing this less than a year later at a scale that's stunning. And we'll talk about that. So Zach, now's your chance, come clean. What are you doing now? When did you join Riot, and what's life looking like in the new role?
Yeah, so I started in March of this year, and for any of the viewers that remember, I've cut my hair. Right. I remember there was one commenter that thought I had stupid hair. So so Johnny in your basement, 1220, my hair is cut.
That was the film producer, Jefferson.
Oh, sorry, that was his alias. But no, so I've been there. Been there for 7 or 8 months, and I do the exact same thing, right? That we do. It's just from a different lens, and so it's the same thing that I've been doing for the past decade. It's policy, it's coalitions, it's recognizing where there's good opportunities, good partners to work with, good bits of legislation to try to advance, bad legislation to try to stop, and I viewed it through the lens of a congressional staffer. So what is in the interest of a district, of a member from small rural Iowa. I did it in the same lens as a state senator representing a small rural district. Sure. Here from a public interest perspective, and now through Riot from a corporate lens. And so it's actually been kind of a fun thing. It's the first time I've worked in the private sector in like well over a decade, and so it's kind of a fun thing to take those various lenses and learn how a big and really growing fast company works and operates in this space. So it's been a lot of fun. I think a lot of the issues that we focused on before, AI, blockchain, workforce, water was something that we focus on. We're looking at those things, and now, my biggest thing has just been trying to learn a lot about energy, because as we have a whole policy, there is a whole policy center here. Right. I'm no longer but here, and there's a lot to learn in that space. So that's been really fun, and we have a great team. Like we have some really really great people starting at the head of the organization. All the way down to people who keep our miners running every day in Rockdale and Corsicana. So it's a really cool thing to see how how it's a really cool company. It's a really cool model, and so far it's been a lot of fun. Yeah. But I do miss you, and Jefferson, I miss you.
Yeah, well, the feeling is mutual, but it makes it a lot easier seeing the great work you guys are doing, and as veritable partners in so many crucial issues, which we'll get into. I will say to kind of piggyback off your point about we're all becoming energy experts in the tech realm now, kind of hot off the press news that should go live at TPPF, probably at the time of this recording, is historically our energy initiative, Life Powered, has been standalone focused on energy. Our Better Tech for Tomorrow initiative is being combined into that as we look to the golden age and all the opportunities where you need water, energy, and tech policy minds working together. It just made sense strategically for our organization, and I know that's where the private sector is going as well, where the drinking from the fire hose or whatever idiom you want to use. So your timing joining and your longstanding leadership here for both of y'all, it's been a breakneck last 6 months of what, we can talk about the silent revolution of blockchain happening in plain sight. We're seeing it visibly at the policy level as well. And I can go into specific questions I have, but I'll start with you, Brian. What's changed in the policy realm we'll keep it mostly to blockchain now and move to others in the last 6 or so months from your POV?
Oh my gosh, what has changed? Well, so I think the last time we chatted, we were probably still dealing with the aftermath of Operation Choke Point 2.0 and fighting back against really discriminatory regulation. The previous federal administration had been, trying to cut off bank accounts. There was censorship. There was an effort to really kick Bitcoin mining as an industry out of the United States. Right. Now we have President Trump who's saying, no, we're going to be the capital of the world for all these things. All the banking regulators have revoked all the choke point rules. We now have, executive orders starting a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We have executive orders on how to bolster AI, speed to power effort at the U.S. Department of Energy. Texas, of course, is implementing its own strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean,
and Kate, first set for our listeners, some may not remember, what is the strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Yeah, so that's a sovereign that's holding sound money, Bitcoin, with supply cap, as a reserve asset to protect the state against inflation, runaway spending in Washington, the devaluation of currency. We have gold reserves. Bitcoin is sort of the 21st century digital version of that sound money. So it's a way of kind of strengthening the state's balance sheet and to protect it against future upheaval in the world, because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Right. So as more individuals, corporate institutions, and sovereigns acquire it, it will only become more and more scarce. There will only be more and more demand, and the supply ain't moving. So that's why it's in the strategic interest of the state.
Yeah, and Oh, go ahead.
And I was just say, and it was a law that the legislature passed and the governor signed to spend $10 million on that. And right now, the comptroller is going through, I think, the RFI process. Yep. We have so many RFIs right now, we can't keep it straight.
It's RFI season.
It is RFI season, but the comptroller is going through a request for information to learn how do we actually administer this. So that's kind of where we're at. And so you go from the idea of, if we would have been sitting here a year ago, I mean, we would have been like, is this real? Is this going to happen? I mean, I know that there were members that were working on it, Senator Schwertner and Representative
I think it was exactly a year ago when we had Lee here. After the podcast episode, after we finished shooting it, we saw Lieutenant Governor Patrick announce it as a priority. Yes. So I think it's worth highlighting too. It's President Trump from the top saying, states step up. This is a conservative policy framework we should be advancing. And our Lieutenant Governor, who he's not a Luddite by any stretch of the imagination, but he tends not to be vocal and leading on tech issues, said this is a top 25 issue for the state of Texas. And here we are a year later. It's pretty amazing how fast it all moved.
Yeah, and Texas led the way. I mean, they led the way. There were other states that contemplated this. States like Arizona and New Hampshire looked at like seized assets, which I think is kind of the approach that the administration is taking. Texas is unique in in investing $10 million in it, and for all the reasons that Brian said. Diversifying states, they have various asset holdings. This is just another. It's a freedomy avenue of diversifying assets.
Yeah, so, that's right. And now the conversation right now is, having resolved a bunch of those issues, there's still more to go. We can talk about the legislation on digital assets and things, but it's really about, do we have enough energy in America to power this fourth industrial revolution? I keep hearing it called. And so are we generating enough electrons? How do we generate more? Are we moving them effectively and efficiently? Do we have enough flexibility in the off-tickers, in the business models, to use what we have now more efficiently? So these are the sorts of conversations that are ongoing, and it's about, how can the U.S. win the race? And I think, proud to say, our company is a very important part of that right now.
Absolutely. And if memory serves, I know you served under Trump's 45th admin in a press secretary role in the Treasury office. Is that?
So I was a deputy assistant secretary at Treasury, and then I was a White House deputy press secretary.
That's so I don't have this. We're going to talk about this more later. What do you think? Was there a shift that happened with Trump's vision on technology? I mean, a lot of it is just the market signals and innovators and things, but you having been there on the front lines in Trump 45, what do you think has shifted? Because we're seeing a full-throated, aggressive, and correct approach to technology as a core component of our economy. Just curious if you have any insights there.
Yeah, I do. Well, one thing that has shifted dramatically was Trump family businesses, political organizations were all debanked. That was a big issue, and that made him look at alternatives and made him understand why people like Bitcoin, for example, and why censorship is bad and why freedomy options are good. So I think his personal experience made him very just made him want to be more involved and see the promise of it. I also think in terms of the tech race, he understands how AI. So Bitcoin's changed the way people think about money and the way people transact in the economy. AI is going to change the way people consume information and really how everybody answers questions, which is a part of every single job in America. So if we're good at it, we will lead, and the American tech stack will be exported, and we will be continue to have a leading role in how the world works. If we lose, then somebody else's values are going to be infused into it. And I think he also sees frankly the economic opportunity here. We're talking about, some very smart analysts are talking about, the internet boom plus 40% or something in terms of the efficiencies created. And we can talk about the doomerism on jobs and lots of different aspects of this, but he sees the opportunity set here for the country, and he doesn't want to miss it. Our policymakers have not done great over the last few decades in that respect. We've been a little bit handicapped, so we have a lot of ground to make up, and I think he sees that.
I think a crystallizing anecdote that I'll turn into question for you both is David Sachs in the All In podcast talking about the Genius Act.
Yeah.
And I'll have you guys explain to our listeners, kind of what that does. But I remember as he's talking about the members of the Senate who are on the fence about it and unsure, this is like 3 a.m, hours before it's up for a vote. And Sachs said Trump personally whipped votes on this issue. Yes. And for that to happen at the executive level in a state on a bill is big, let alone nationally, the President of the United States personally advocating for the Genius Act. So what is that bill? Why is that important for the industry? And maybe why is Trump so passionate about it?
Sure. The Genius Act is stable coins. So you're talking about sort of digitized dollars that are not central bank digital currencies, but issued by private entities that then back them with treasuries, dollars, things that are good backup assets for an actual dollar. And so this was the kind of low-hanging fruit. So there's a lot of policy disputes on how exactly to create a digital asset market. What's a security? What's a commodity? Stable coins, the legislators in particular could wrap their head around that. And so this was kind of a first step. You could read tea leaves, who in Congress is supportive, generally who wants to learn, who wants to get to yes, who's just going to fold their arms and say no matter what. Like this is a good test vote because the need was there to pass some rules of the road, and you had enough critical mass in Congress to get it there. Some of the hangups, like at the 11th hour, were, this is creating a central bank digital currency. No, it wasn't. In fact, it was explicitly banned in the bill. But there's some confusion about that. People, if you're not on the committee, you're not talking about it every day. You're just asked, it's time to vote on the floor. And so some of those issues were started to fly around at the 11th hour as they were trying to get it passed. But I think Trump knew that there's a few legs on this stool of his legislative agenda. Genius Act was one leg. The next is Clarity Act, which we can talk about. The third is Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. And then floating around in the ether all around this is AI policy and the broader tech world, and how are we going to power the future with energy. So that's kind of the atmosphere that we're dealing with.
Well, let's go into Clarity Act if we can before we start jumping into data centers. That's one I've done some reading on. I'm not as familiar, so even for my edification, what's that approach with that bill?
You want to start?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is this is thinking about sort of, President Trump using his bully pulpit was stable coins. Genius got out of the Senate, and I think the hang up was in the House, and he was telling the House, you need to get this done. So then in the House, they started with market structure, what they called the Clarity Act. And they, went through a very deliberate process, a good process, came out with a decent product, and they sent it over to the Senate, and the president's like, okay, they took yours, you take theirs, everybody's happy. And that's had a little bit of a hang up. And so where we are kind of in the sort of timeline is the Senate has decided we want to look at our two committees of jurisdiction, the Agriculture Committee and the Banking Committee have different purviews. And so they bifurcated the bill. And so the Senate Banking Committee is looking at how do we regulate digital assets from a securities perspective, and the agriculture portion of the bill is looking at it as the CFTC, or the commodity side of it. And so there, that has been, I think that momentum has slowed a little bit for a variety of reasons, including the shutdown and things like that. But they just came out with their draft committee and the Senate Ag Committee. So hopefully there'll be some movement. And the goal of it being you define and then you marry up what are the sort of jurisdiction, what should the SEC be regulating from a securities perspective, what should the CFTC be regulating from a commodities perspective, marry those two together, and you have these two agencies that now they actually want to work together instead of being adversarial. The goal of which having a light touch but lightly regulated market to allow digital assets, things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to thrive and to have regulatory clarity around it. I mean, to use their word, to have regulatory clarity around it rather than it just sort of floating in the ether and then the government comes in and pulls the rug out, 5 years later.
And that is one of the big animating, actually kind of from your experience as a former state senator, when we're starting to engage in tech policy, you had told me this, and there was evinced time and time again by industry on any of the bills we're working on, which is we want clear rules of the road. But then with the crypto realm and stable coins, whatever it might be, post FTX was also a recognition that's not representative of how the marketplace is actually in a free market enterprise going to play out. And laws or bills like this provide that clarity that are assurances for consumers, but then also for good faith industry actors who would never go the way of not having assets backed up to make shareholders whole if they ask for it. And so the good actors, as I understand, they're already doing this. It's just making sure we have that clarity across the entire industry so there's confidence from the investor, consumer, and entrepreneur side on this.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, it's also a reaction to the Gensler regime at the SEC in the last administration, where the rules weren't clear.
Sure.
People were doing their best, but they weren't clear, and it was regulation by enforcement. It would be, come on in and talk to us, and then come in and register. And they'd say, register as what? You know, because it's a square peg in a round hole. Like, we want rules that make sense, but they don't exist yet. Let's make them together. And the response they got was subpoenas and Wells notices and enforcement actions. So it was just like totally bad faith on the part of the government. This time around, I think it's a good faith effort to define what is a security, what is a digital commodity, what is a token or a utility token, or all these different things. And I think they're getting to a pretty good place. The House process was good. The Senate is working on it. I think one of the hangups is DeFi, so decentralized finance, peer-to-peer transactions. And I think some of the Senate offices are not as comfortable with that. There are some national security hawks who want to be able to sanction anybody, anywhere, anytime, no matter what.
Yeah, right.
And so if you believe, as I do, as freedomy people do, that you should be able to have a hardware wallet in your pocket that is holding your Bitcoin, just as you could have a wad of cash, then maybe the government shouldn't have access to absolutely every transaction that ever takes place. And illicit transactions have been taking place since the dawn of time. And even now, people will trade art or precious metals or whatever. Or suitcases full of US dollars, right? Like, there's always going to be illicit transactions. I'm not endorsing illicit transactions, but you have to balance the security with the liberty. And so, and this community is very much against, like, the central bank digital currency model, where the government has surveillance and control over every transaction. That is dystopian and scary. So the DeFi piece of the puzzle is a tough one, but that's what's kind of holding things up right now. That's where the debate's going on.
One of the this is very well put, and this is more bringing it back for the audience too. When we have members come in or asking for briefing on, why is the central bank digital currency and the opposition there? Why is that important? The Canadian trucker convoy is always the story I come back to.
Yes.
Do you guys want to take a second to remind our listeners of how ridiculous that was, and how even folks in the Biden admin saw that as, hey, this is a great tool?
Yes. So if you go back to COVID days, and of course, we already mentioned the fact that, like, Trump and his family members and his political organization were debanked, and many companies in our space were debanked, even though we're perfectly legal businesses. There's nothing wrong with it, but they viewed, like, regulatory risk, because the Biden administration was like, ooh, we can debank people we don't like. So the Canadian trucker experience was during COVID, vaccine mandates. The truckers didn't like the vaccine mandates. They wanted, to make their own decisions on whether or not they should get vaccinated. And the Canadian government's response, and so they had protests, and the Canadian government's response was to figure out who are these people and freeze their bank accounts. So they couldn't pay their mortgage, they couldn't grocery shop, they couldn't do anything. And then people would start GoFundMes to say, oh, well, the government's being bad. Here's some money to get you through. We think you should have the right to protest. You should have free speech and the right to make your own medical decisions. So here's a GoFundMe. Then the Canadian government shut down the GoFundMe accounts. And they had all these digital levers to cut people off from their money, to coerce them into doing what they wanted to do. It was scary. It's a great example because people remember it and they're like, oh yeah, I don't want the government to be able to shut off my money. That's terrifying. So that's why.
And it's like, this is where I think Trump is so right on this from a policy perspective, but then culturally as well, because the Trudeaus of the world and the World Economic Forums of the world, they're the ones who want the central bank digital currency. That is a perfect depiction of the elites versus the everyday, in this case, Canadian, or for, the Bitcoin revolutionaries in America, the everyday American who just wants to have freedom, self-determination, and so on. And I think it's always important to bring that back, because what we're fighting for is not just this cool diversification. In many respects, it's for freedom and the ability to determine as you see fit.
If I could just inject on that point, I think that's one of the things that that has really resonated with me the most. And you kind of know my background with crime victims' rights, which just was this thing that I was very passionate about. But some of the human rights groups that have come to various conferences and things that we go to, is that this isn't like about the idea of what would Rush Limbaugh call them, long-haired, maggot-infested, Birkenstock wearing FM types, crypto bros from crypto bros from like Southern California trying to make a bunch of money.
Sure,
This is a means by which people who cannot otherwise engage in commerce safely, effectively, all around the world, places where political opponents are being targeted, as they were in the United States. It is a means by which they can engage in commerce and in livelihood. And so to hear some of those human rights groups come and talk about how it's helped villages and people in countries and oppressed parts of the world to be able to engage and not just subsist but thrive. That piece has been encouraging. I think that's the other thread in this is there is that balancing of, yes, we do not want cryptocurrencies being used to finance nuclear terrorism, and at the same time being able to allow people to carry their thumb drive from Romania through Bulgaria to Tehran and be able to sustain themselves. So that's the other piece that just underscoring the freedom side of it that's been kind of an eye-opening thing for me, and not just like the cool technology side of it, the real world impact that it has.
So after the truckers, though, or before and after the truckers, before the truckers in the U.S., you had choke point 1.0, which is, for example, firearms companies that were having their bank accounts shut off. 2.0 was anybody involved in the digital asset space. And I have a friend who runs multiple companies in this area, and he was both corporately and individually debanked, just kicked out of his bank accounts. And the way that works is they don't tell you a reason. They just send you a letter and say, you're going to get a cashier's check in the mail for your money, and you're done. Well, and if you're a company, you can't run payroll. Like, all your employees are affected by that. You have to go find another bank who's going to take you, and they might ask, well, what the heck happened with the last bank? And it's like, well, they didn't even tell me, And so, it's a very heavy-handed way of regulating how people live and how they do business, and that was happening here in America. It wasn't just in Canada. So, we're glad to see those policies reversed.
Yeah. The corollaries on ESG, environmental social governance, as it relates to banking, it's almost stunning how close it is to, the pre-Elon Twitter censoring regime and all that. It's the same playbook, except this time it's, the same no notification that your YouTube account has been banned, but this is your life. Your entire life is decimated. So yeah, that's helpful tying it back into the everyday Texan or El Salvadorian, whatever it might be, shifting to this fire hose component of data centers and how you guys are just hitting the ground running on it. And so I encourage listeners, I wouldn't normally say, hey, read a company's, quarterly report. Y'all's Q3 report, I thought, does a great job of breaking down, here's our vision, here's what we're focused on. But I'll give you a chance to cut an advertisement for, maybe let's start with Corsicana. What's the big project that's well underway there? What is that going to look like for your data center assets? Yeah,
so it's a gigawatt of power capacity at this site, which for your listeners is a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot of power. We have 400 megawatts mining Bitcoin, 600 megawatts of available capacity. We are building the infrastructure for large-scale data centers. So, think AI or cloud computing, a number of uses that are highly relevant in how our economy is growing today. And we've got a data center team now that is trying to make us, they are making us actually a vertically integrated company, from everything from the transformers and the switchgear equipment. A subsidiary of our company makes that stuff. We have our construction crews. We have all the people maintaining the Bitcoin miners. We have the people designing the data center buildings. Our crews will build the buildings. We're doing it soup to nuts. It's really, really neat. So the hope is there'll be turnkey facilities ready for whichever company needs access to that power. So I like to say we skated to where the puck was going, which was if you have approved operating interconnections, you have all this electricity, how can we best monetize the megawatts to help the economy grow, to help the country meet the moment? And it's sort of an interesting model of Bitcoin coming in first. First of all, it's about 1/12 the CapEx required. So it's a lot cheaper. You can do it a lot faster. You build a capital stack. We have like 20,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. That's billions of dollars. You can then finance against that to then go build out this other use of the megawatts. So it's sort of a bootstrapping approach. First comes the Bitcoin, then comes the AI, and then rinse and repeat. And the hope is to go find other sites, other towns that could use some jobs, some development. If the land is powered, or maybe it's not yet powered, but we can help get it there because we've got the expertise in house. We have power guys, we have data center designers, we have Bitcoiners. So we have different ways of again, going back to the kind of the initial question we started with, which was, do we have enough electrons? How do we create more electrons? Are we moving them efficiently? And then if they're moved to where they need to be, how do you use them most efficiently? Because a lot of the power in this country is actually stranded most of the time. We have excess power the vast majority of the time. It's like 2% of the year that we're anywhere near peak power. So it's how can we use what we have better? How can we use what we have to build what we need to maximize growth and prosperity? So that's the idea.
Well, and I have to ask the obvious follow-up question. This isn't flippant, but this is, I think, helpful for policymakers, legislative staff who are focused on data centers as becoming one of the top issues on minds of lawmakers. Why did y'all select Texas?
I mean,
other than it being the best state in the union.
Yeah, I mean, that was a decision before I started, and probably even then you started. But I mean, it's got all the ingredients. You have land that's available. You have cheap and abundant energy. You have a friendly regulatory, environment, and so it has all the ingredients. I mean, there's other companies that work at. We also have a small facility in Kentucky, but our primary assets are here in Texas. We have, some of our competitors or friends in the industry because we're friendly with their teams, but they're in like Georgia and Ohio and elsewhere. So I just think Texas has all the ingredients and the advantage. I think that point that Brian made is one of the big policy debates that we're seeing now through a Department of Energy initiative is trying to figure out how do we get like power online quickly to meet these data center needs for the future. We need to be thinking towards the future, but also to the right now is that there are companies that have these assets available, and I think that's one of the things that makes Riot so attractive is you can have those things within. I mean, I think I'm trying to go back to our quarterly report, but I think the goal is to have it like live and going by the end of 26 or maybe early 27. And so all of that to say is like we can move quickly, on that. Yeah. And then the other component that I'll mention, you can elaborate on if you want, is the unique model of what Bitcoin is being a flexible load. And so while, there is most energy is stranded most of the time, there are those times where we hit those peak demands and you have those concerns about, are we going to have brownouts, something you're familiar with where you come from, and something that is an acute concern here in Texas, and it has been. And you've got winter storm examples, and a lot of times during the summer, the unique proposition of a type of, what we do having a flexible load gives, I think, I would hope, more certainty to regulators, to customers, just the general public, that we can do the things that it takes to be good, responsible grid citizens. And so you can blend those two models, utilizing some of our energy for more firm AI loads, and some of that component for flexible Bitcoin loads. That just seems to be like the magic recipe. That it checks all the boxes. So again, kind of one of those cool, unique things about getting to work at Riot, and learning things like that.
Yeah. In Texas, it's the land, the power, the great leadership, moving at the speed of business is what I keep hearing from all the governor's team, lieutenant governor's team, and that's what we're looking for. Because I think Texas has been very good to us, but I also think we've been very good to Texas. We've hired a lot of people, we've invested tons of money, and it's been a great place to grow a business. And our employees will tell you it's been a great place to raise their families, and I think a really fun team to work for too. So it's been mutually beneficial. Just to give you a contrast, like the New York legislature is debating a moratorium or ban on Bitcoin mining. They're just deciding like, oh well, we don't like that kind of business, so get out. And Texas is like, oh, okay, like you can bring flexibility to our grid and prosperity to our citizens. Come on in. What can we do to help? What a great governance model. So that's part of the reason.
This is why we're becoming the finance capital of the world now too in Texas.
Yes,
Texas Stock Exchange, and I did not hear about that. Is that a recently discussed piece of
Y'all Street?
Wow.
Yeah.
Y'all Street, that's right.
We were at TexCap.
Oh yeah, good.
The New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, and Texas Stock Exchange are all going to be in Dallas, and now there's more JP Morgan employees in Dallas than there are in New York. So,
well, God bless New York and California for doing their things, because it's just making it that much more obvious for Texas. I do, just because this is almost a direct email I get frequently from offices. I want to give you all a chance, even if it's not fully fleshed out yet. You said the ingredients are all there. I mean, that's our assessment as well. What can be done from a magic wand policy perspective to make the ingredients more potent as we look to investing more? If you had your way, whether water, energy, land acquisition, if there's just some things you guys are looking at, even just so our audience can start thinking about those too.
I think the hottest topic right now is probably getting flexible loads interconnected and operational as fast as possible. So that's something both the U.S. Department of Energy and the ERCOT and the PUC are looking at in Texas, is having kind of an HOV lane for flexible loads. So the image I have in my mind is a facility where like 75% of that load is doing AI, and then 25% is mining Bitcoin. And then if we get into any kind of scarcity situation on the grid, we're going to be able to toggle up and down that quarter of your load, which seems to be a sweet spot for the grid operators. It seems to be kind of what they would aim for. And so if you have that kind of load that is going to be monetizing the megawatts, bringing the jobs, bringing the economic development, and also providing tools for the grid to remain reliable, that seems like a business model you want to incentivize. And so getting those in like an HOV lane for the interconnect queue, which then you have to solve for the next question, which is going to be, if you then have a whole bunch of flexible loads connected and then you're also adding firm loads on top, are the flexible loads then going to be just curtailed all the time, in which case your business is messed up. So you got to solve for that problem. But that's like a very hot topic right now that both the federal energy regulators and the Texas energy regulators are talking about, which is very encouraging. Because it's not saying, whoa, you need energy for your business, stop. It's how can we get everybody what they need? And that's a much better way of approaching it, I think. So that's a big topic right now.
Well, and that I appreciate that explanation. I think this kind of segues into the big energy discussion from last session, which was Senate Bill 6. And the first question I'd have is, as succinctly as you can explain, how does Senate Bill 6 affect y'all's industry? And then perhaps, is there anything you're learning so far? I know implementation with PUC and all that's being discussed, but what does it potentially portend for the industry or subsequent bills that you might see?
Well, one thing it does is creates a new ancillary service that's designed for firmer loads. So loads that really need to be drawing electricity most of the time or all the time or as much as possible. They've created like a 24-hour warning program where they say, we think we're going to have scarcity. You have 24 hours to figure out how to be flexible and be able to adapt. So if it's an AI facility, maybe you try to send some of your load to a different grid area. If you have data centers in multiple areas, like most of these companies do, all right, we're going to shift some stuff over here because this particular place is having a weather event or whatever it may be. So there's that new ancillary service. They're also looking at some of the ways they do, like they call it the 4CP, the 4 Coincident Peak Program. So think the hottest times of the year, where every Texan has their air conditioning turned on. If you're participating in that program, you're trying to anticipate when that's going to be, and then you're going to be taking your load off the grid. And the benefit to the business is that then you have certain costs like transmission fees or other things like that, where because then you're not using the transmission if you're participating at that time, then you can get a credit back. You have a little bit lower power bill. So like that's the mutually beneficial thing. You're making sure there's enough power for your everyday Texan. You're getting like a little, because you're giving up your revenue by doing that. So then you get like a little bit of a benefit. So that's a program that works. It's been around since the 90s, I think.
I think it's 96.
Everybody's pretty comfortable with that. They called for like a study and review of that, and they might make some changes to that. So that's something that could affect us. It depends on the changes. If they just like add a couple more peaks, if they're like, oh, during January, if there's a freeze, or you know, maybe we'll add a peak here, a peak there. Like that's the kind of thing that we understand and I think is very workable. So hopefully it goes in that direction. But that's another SB6 thing that is working its way through the process.
And it's a big bill with that number. That meant it was a very important. That was a very important bill, and you know, big picture. And it changed a lot from when it was introduced to what ultimately passed. I mean, the goal from looking at it through the lens of the legislature is, again, we have a lot of demand. And we have these really large loads. I think 75 megawatts under the bill being how do we sort of regulate these large loads? There's the piece in there about, yes, we want to try to expedite the interconnection process, but then there's also this queue, this all these projects in there that are backed up, and some of them. One of the concerns is about what were called phantom loads. So it's people that have an idea of, I need energy for this project, but we don't know if we're going to do it in Texas, or if we're going to do it in Virginia, or if we're going to do it in Ohio, or we're not actually going to do it at all. And so I think that's another piece that the bill tried to figure out, is how do we clean out that queue to make sure that the projects that are being considered by regulators are things that are the most likely to get online quickly. And then there's that piece about should you give preference to flexible loads. And so one of our sort of mutual friends, so when Gideon Powell, he tried to say, hey, can we try to expedite this, through the state legislative process? He had a bill for that. That's exactly what Department of Energy is considering at the federal level right now. And so it's how do you expedite getting generation on and to the grid so that we can power the next wave of economic growth. That was a big part of it. And so they put in things like, you put in like a $100,000, I don't know what you call it, a fee, or it's like a study fee. It's essentially a security deposit that you pay back to show that you're serious. Right. So again, it was a priority bill for the Senate. It changed a lot as it went through. It ultimately gets signed, and then now, like with a lot of things, you work from a regulatory standpoint of, okay, as they administer these programs, the agencies that are tasked with administering them, are they doing it right? Are they doing it well? And that's not a value judgment on SB6. It's just every bill. So that's something we continue to work with regulators on, trying to ensure that it's administered with the intent, that was in the bill. And that's why it's important when, Senator Schwartner and others get asked at, events, well, what was your intent with X, Y, and Z? That gives regulators a little more, a little more focus in what they're doing. So big bill that did a lot of things.
I just want to put a finer point on that phantom load point, because it was really important, because the estimates coming out of ERCOT is just like, well, if you put all the requests and you pretend that all of them are going to happen, then these load estimates are terrifying.
Didn't it double the current estimate? It was like 140 gigawatts would be required per the phantom load consideration. It was some ridiculous number.
It was absurd, and everybody's saying, well, that's never going to happen, because the queue, maybe it's 20% of the projects that are in the queue actually happen. So everybody's lighting their hair on fire. So that provision was really important, because you have to show that you control the land. You have a lease or you have the deed, whatever it may be. You can show that you are making some kind of business moves years towards actually making this project real, and you have to do this deposit, which, you know, then assuming you go forward with your plans, I think the idea is that you then kind of earn it out. But basically, you have to show you have skin in the game, that this is a real project. That I can't underscore enough. Like that makes a huge difference.
Right.
And the federal level, they're looking at that as well. So I think in a couple different ways, the DOE is taking cues maybe from what Texas has been doing, which is a good thing.
And that's a good provision.
Right,
that's a good provision.
Oh, I mean, it was calamitous. The testimony from ERCOT, which it's not to say they were giving erroneous information. It was just based on erroneous inputs.
Yeah.
And the consequence to that was a real fear from industry when there were tweets or statements made that, hey, we can't handle this, provide your own energy. And that's why, you know, I'd forgotten that was a component of Senate Bill 6, but that transparency and accuracy is huge. Knowing that we're coming close to adjournment here, I'm going to ask you a kind of different conclusory question since we talked about White House considerations, where Trump 47 is headed. What are y'all optimistic about in tech policy writ large? I mean, we talked about an incredible year and some great advancements and developments that have been made, but is there something, even if it's outside of blockchain data centers, what excites you about tech and tech policy right now?
You want to go first?
I think I just think we're at the sort of, you know, the precipice of this big breakthrough of, you know, what can AI provide as a value add to our daily lives, to the economy, and all those sort of things. I'm excited to see how businesses and the workforce adapt to that. I'm kind of heartened about, you know, the collaborative model that the education team here and others work on about, you know, training the workforce, upskilling, reskilling. Is a 4-year degree necessary? In some places, yes. In some places, not. So I'm excited about the impact. You know, hopefully it will have a positive impact on the workforce, and as a technology, and we can harness it for, you know, good things and solve some of those grand problems that have been, you know, vexing us for a long time. That's kind of an ambitious thing. And then it's also like cool to wake up every day and see the wild ideas that are out there. So like, it's one thing that I think of is like the president put out a 401k executive order saying like, you want to give people more flexibility in what they can invest their retirement accounts in, and that includes things like digital assets. I like the idea of giving people a little bit more permission, like the retail investor, a little more permission. Even like in our, like in my wife's, you know, in her corporate 401k, it's pretty limited, you know, the choices that you have. So things like that, you wake up every day and there's like these new wild, crazy ideas. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. You know, 3-4 years ago, a strategic Bitcoin reserve would have been a kooky idea. And now it's like legitimate policy. That's not only the law, the land and state of Texas, could very well become, you know, law, whether it's statutorily or more likely through executive order. So I'm just excited about the vision that people have, that they're ready to, you know, hopefully unleash technology for good. But we're also, you know, like the dad in me recognizes, like, you know, where are those like appropriate limits, and things like protecting kids. So those are the things that I kind of look from like my lens, like working for Riot, and my lens of being a dad in 2025.
Yeah. And well said. And it's, you know, reflective of the business heavy approach to the current cabinet team, admin, not just the season of Doge, but the season of how can we incorporate this into the lives of everyday Americans for net positive gains of humanity. Yeah. Brian, your thoughts?
I think we're going to be able to answer questions and process information and accomplish great things so much faster that it wasn't that long ago that 3, 4, 5% GDP growth was like something that happened on a pretty regular basis. I think we're going to get back to that. And I think people are going to accomplish more in less time, and they're going to have more wealth and more time with their families. I really do. That's my vision of the golden age. And I think we're a part of it because we're mining Bitcoin, the kind of freedom money, the sound money, supply capped money that's going to help people grow wealth and protect it. And we're changing the way people answer questions and accomplish things. And we're going to do it faster, and we're going to do it better, and life is going to get easier, and we're going to be able to spend time more time with our kids and have more money in our accounts. I think it's going to be such a wonderful world that we're creating. We're advancing humanity. I hate when I hear the doomer narratives about all these people are going to get laid off, whatever. Okay, I come from law firm world before I worked at Riot and in the administration. I worked at a law
all your
firm.
former colleagues are going to be gone, though.
There will never be a shortage of disputes in the court system. One of the problems that makes our court system much less just than it should be is because of the years-long backlogs.
Right.
Well, if you have attorneys that can be using AI to help them with their research, and I encourage all you lawyers out there, check, because the fake citations and the hallucinations have led to very bad situations, sanctions in court. So, but if you're able to process these cases faster and the judges can make decisions faster, you can get justice faster. Like, that doesn't mean less lawyers.
Right.
That means better, more efficient lawyers. Like, that's great, the All In Pod was talking about the horse and buggy drivers who were put out of business by the Model T.
Yeah.
That didn't mean transportation went away.
Right.
It meant that it got better.
Yeah. It meant instead of, shoveling horse manure, you were on a more dignified assembly line where you have enough money to eventually afford your own vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think this is going to be such a period of progress. I love the president's moniker, the golden age, because I really do see such wonderful changes, I think, coming, and it won't be without bumps in the road.
Right.
And but my hope is that there'll be so many more winners than losers in this, that it's like society is going to advance in a much more positive way.
Right. Well said. Well, I'm on Team Riot. So let's end with folks want to check out Riot Platforms. Where do they go? Where do they find you? I know you're still not on social media, so we're looking to you, Brian. Where do they go to find more about y'all's work? Yeah,
so riotplatforms.com. They can read the documents you were talking about. We talk about grid support on there. We talk about community support and how involved we are in Texas. So if you want to learn about that, our website, riotplatforms.com. I post updates, news of the day, commentary, stuff like that on X at Morgenstern NJ. I was born in New Jersey. Doesn't mean I don't have love for the great state of Texas, but that's my my X handle. So at Morgenstern NJ, we post a lot of updates.
And you'll have a podcast too, right? Yeah.
We do, the peer-to-peer policy pod. So I always joke, I've never imagined I'd host one podcast in my life, and I left here to go host another podcast.
Right.
And it's been it is fun when you get into that regular cadence, and we've had a variety of guests on over time. And before I got there, Whip Emmer was a guest on the show. But we get together about once a week. This week we're off because we're here in studio in Austin recording. But we try to record about once a week and just talk about what are current events in the Bitcoin space, the digital asset space, AI, and then business generally, politics generally. We try to we have some fun segments at the end too. So we try to have fun with it, and it's been a really neat thing, and it's just kind of like this weird full circle sort of meta moment to come back here. Being the first time I met you, you were a guest on our podcast, and now we'll have to have you as a guest on our podcast.
Well, when you're hearing the fun segments, do you guys have a Disgrazia segment on your show?
No, but I kind of like it. We'll look at that. We do a grab bag of just random stuff that we like to talk about, and then we do a what's the headline, where we read a weird news story and then we give it our own headline.
Okay.
Which is kind of fun.
Well, there you go, folks. Check it out. Peer-to-peer podcast. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. And until next time on the show.